Greetings OPPO community and welcome to our next session on market system stakeholder mapping and analysis. This is a follow-up to the value chain mapping and analysis. So we have been sharing already the other OPPO tools, and today we are focusing on stakeholder mapping and assessing stakeholder roles and collaboration. So we're moving further along the OPPO cycle. About the tool. Stakeholder mapping and analysis helps you to identify a broad range of stakeholders that are important in the agricultural market system, and also to map these in a figure that resembles to a hamburger, and more to this later. The aim of the tool is to be firstly aware of all the different types of stakeholders that are there, and then to look at how can we improve the stakeholder roles and the collaboration. For whom and why? The tool is interesting for everyone who is interested to reflect on the current market system, and also to see different perspectives and to know where are the different actors located and what can be done to improve this collaboration. And it's particularly useful for farmers and their organizations. So when should you use it? It's good if you want to really reflect on the relationships farmers and organizations have with the different actors, and to review the different roles and the different responsibilities that are in the system. And what can we do to develop or improve those relations and the collaboration to strengthen it. And it's recommended that you combine it with the other tool, the value chain mapping and analysis, to make really well-informed decisions to go further with your case. So I've just given you a quick overview on the tool, but we'll go a little bit more into detail what the value chain to market system perspective means, and then we will zoom in to the different actor groups, from the value chain operators, supporters, enablers, and externally funded facilitators. And then we'll go into detail how to do the mapping and the analysis itself.
So like Jana said, this is the next step after the value chain mapping and analysis. And you have been busy mapping the value chains, and then we focus on the value chain operators. Again, this figure is familiar to you. It goes from farmers to consumers, we said in the previous presentation, with all kinds of intermediate actors who can be farmers' organizations, traders, processors, wholesalers, retailers, and they all own the product at some point along the value chain. And we call them value chain operators, and it's always from production to consumers, from field to fork, from fish to dish, from grass to glass. Value chain operators, who are they? They were in the previous figure. I don't need to repeat them again. Cleaners, traders, processors, transporters, etc. They create value. That's where also the value chain perspective comes from. And I cannot stress it enough, they own the product at some stage. So all these value chain operators, they are also involved in transactions, and they pay for the product along the value chain, so they are the owner at some point. Now, with this presentation, we go from value chain to market system perspective, because in a market system there are not only value chain operators, there are so many more. There are many private sector players, but also public sector players. For some people, they say, in a market system we don't have government. We say, no, you need government institutions, you need public players. To get an idea of who are all these players in the system, I have a next graph. This is already alluding to the hamburger that we will talk about more. But who are the other players? There are so many. Of course, with OPPO we put farmers organizations and farmers in the middle, and around them we have so many other players. If we look at this side, we have the value chain operators I was talking about already, but then we have another group, we will explain them later, the supporters, agro-input suppliers, seed producers, laborers. Also on the financial side we have banks, microfinance institutions, money lenders, etc. Then in the public sector you see in light blue ministries, local government, agriculture research, universities, all kinds of government agencies like Extension Service, Land Administration, Meteorological Agency, Bureau of Standards, you name them, there are so many. And of course these are different from country to country. On the top right side in red you see another group of players, international organizations, projects, NGOs, donor organizations. We come to talk them also. So the purpose of this presentation is to help you to structure the diversity of players that are in a sector.
Hello again. Ted just introduced you the value chain operators, and he said that he cannot stress enough that they own the product and that they create value along the value chain. And he shared with you a diversity of stakeholders in this figure, in this slide that you just saw. So he said the traders, the exporters, processors, auctions, importers and consumers are the value chain operators because they own the product, and some of them are already the ones that create value. But then are the transporters, cleaners and graders also value chain operators, Ted?
Depends, and this is the important distinction between value chain operators and value chain supporters. Supporters, they provide services at the, to earn money, and they may or may not own the product. For instance, a transporter who's just transporting the dalo or the taro from one place to another. If they are paid by the farmers or by traders, they are supporter. They're not necessarily the owner of the dalo. If they own it, they might be a trader having a truck. Then the trader transporter is a value chain operator because they own the product that is inside the truck. But often they are just service providers, the same thing for cleaners and graders. They may do that service for a certain price, but they don't necessarily own the product. In that case, we distinguish them in another group which we call value chain supporters.
Yes, and sometimes farmer organization can do the cleaning and grading themselves with the help of their members, and then it's again becoming a value chain operator that owns the product and creates value.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, Ted. Let me explain the value chain supporters. The value chain supporters, like Ted just explained, are actors who provide services that you might need in your agribusiness. This can be the laborers when you need to harvest or do other activities during the production. Agro-input providers and seed companies that provide you the production factors that you need to be able to cultivate your commodity. Financial services that might be giving you services to get money to be able to buy your inputs. Middlemen and brokers that you might have to interact with, they provide you services to find markets. Or sometimes there can be also brokers that provide some inputs that you need for your farm organization, for instance. Transporters, storekeepers, equipment suppliers, electricity and water suppliers, agribusiness support services are all seen as value chain supporters. It's very basic. There is a service you need, you pay for that service. These are not along the value chain, but they are outside of the value chain and are there to help you, or not help you, but to provide you the services that you need by paying them. These are generally private services. Note that these could also be public services in case that they are enablers. What kind of public services do you refer to here, do you think, Ted?
Well, what is important is that we talk generally for market systems about public-private partnerships. Value chain supporters are private services. They do the service provision as a business and they get paid for it. Sometimes, for instance, we saw here the seed supply. Sometimes it's the government institution that is supplying the seeds to farmers. Maybe sometimes for a price, sometimes it's even distributed for free. Then it's a public service. If it's a public services, we call them value chain enablers. So we make the distinction between private and public sector supporters, those organizations that help value chain operators.
And another one that can be confused would be the extension services. The governments can have extension services for their farmers, but sometimes agro input providers will also have teams that will do extension work so that they make sure their agro input is used in the proper way. So when it's private services given, value chain supporters, but if it's extension services given by the government, we say more that it's enablers, which we will explain more in details in the coming slides. So again, in our agri-sector players slide, the service supporters would be, as a repetition, agro-input shops, equipment suppliers, seed producers, enterprises, laborers, but also all the financial institutions that provides us services so that we can access to finance. And when we visualize those, which gets us closer to the hamburger, we try to put the support functions above. So we name all the players above here that are in our cases to be able to see what kind of services are occurring, are existing in our own business case. And if sometimes you Google the market system stakeholders, you can come across a different way of visualizing it. And then you can see the support functions that are put under. But the only thing that you need to know, value chain supporters are different stakeholders that provide us services in return for money. We talked about the enablers while talking about the extension services that might be provided by the government. The enablers, from the name it comes already, it's all the institutions that enables the agribusiness, the market system to function. For that you can think of ministries, government agencies, like Cooperative Promotion Agency, inspection services, the Bureau of Standards that make sure that the cultivation agriculture is done within the norms that are established by the country. Local government and local administrative office for the monitoring that the rules and regulations are implemented well. Research and universities by directing their research according to the needs of the farmers so that they improve their production. Extension services, so that if innovation is introduced in the sites, they make sure that they are done in the right way. Law enforcement, police, courts and border controls that might occur, for instance, for land tenure problems. Tax revenue authority for the system to function and pay the necessary tax from the profit that we are making. Value chain enablers define and control the policy and business environments. They create conditions for private sector to do business, and sometimes they can be disabler too, because they will push people to act within the boundaries that comes from the law and regulations, which is very necessary. But they are predominantly the public sector because of the government creating the enabling environment for agribusiness to happen. The public sector is therefore very important. And maybe one addition to that is that they are also the ones that ensure the laws and regulations that enables us to access more markets. Like ministries of health, the Bureau of Standards will make sure that we have the produce that is potentially good for the market and that can be sold and not sent back. The enablers, we visualize them, and that has a half moon under, but like I said, in some visualization you can see it the other way around. But what is important is that the functions they carry out. And we see more public support functions. Again, back to our agri-sector player slide. These would be the ministries, the regional local government, which would take up the role of monitoring that the laws and regulations are put into practice, or to regulate whether extension services are reaching the right target group, agricultural research, universities, government agencies, land administration, trade and industry, meteo, which is crucial for farmers, especially with pest management, Women Affairs Bureau of Standards. At the end, when we visualize our different stakeholders in our market system, how does it look like? Looks like a hamburger, right? So the meat in the middle, our value chain operators who create value and own the products at the different states of the value chain. The private support functions are our supporters who, for instance, provide input for the farmers or provide the traders transport services to be able to create value and go on along the value chain. And the public support functions are the functions that could be, and as an example, the public sector providing extension services for the farmers, or defining the rules on how the processing can be made from a health perspective. The meat is in the middle because the value is created in the middle and the product reaches the market, the end consumers, in the middle. Another way of showing it, still looking like a hamburger, private functions, will not repeat myself, but then in this figure, a difference that we see is here is written company, but by company it can also be the bulking node where all the produce is collected and bulked, so that it can be redistributed to the different actors along the value chain to finally reach out to consumers.
So you have created your hamburger, but with the hamburger you usually have a side dish, which is maybe some taro fries or some salad. So the side dish here are the external facilitators. These are the international organizations, NGOs, donors, projects. And what is important to say here is that they are not part of the local market system, but they are just on the side to support, to, for example, provide training and information services, to bring stakeholders together to discuss, facilitate market linkages, or to support strategy development. And they can accelerate innovation, strengthen capacity, support scaling and institutionalization. But we put them on the sideline. So next to the hamburger you have your side dish, and the side dish supports the main dish. Yeah, there's one more. As an example is an aquaculture case. So you see here the public supporters, and on the top the private supporters. The meat in the middle are the main actors, and on the side you have the support, for example, an aquaculture development program, World Fish Training Center. So you can clearly see how the actors are arranged